Ring ring, it's the telephone. Hey kids, did you know that people haven't always had phones? It's true. Long ago people couldn't just call each other whenever they wanted. Can you imagine? It's true. So how they talk to each other? That's what we're going to find out today. We're going on an adventure to see how the telephone went from being just an idea to something we use every day. Are you ready? Let's go. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more awesome content. Talking without talking. Before the telephone, people had to find really creative ways to talk to each other, especially if they were far apart. They didn't have the luxury of instant messaging or video calls. Communication was an art and a challenge. Imagine wanting to share some exciting news with your best friend who lived in another town. You couldn't just call them. You had to think of other ways to get your message across. Instead of phones, people used to write letters. They would sit down with a pen and paper, carefully crafting their words. It was a thoughtful process, and every letter was a piece of art. Someone would bring the letter to your friend's house, and then they'd write back, and someone would bring the letter back to you. It took so long. Sometimes it could take weeks or even months to get a reply. Sometimes people used smoke signals, like they do in the movies. This method was often used by Native American tribes and other ancient cultures. They would make a fire and use the smoke to send messages. It was like a puzzle, trying to figure out what the smoke meant. Each puff of smoke had a specific meaning, and it required skill to interpret. Can you believe it? And guess what else? People even used pigeons to carry messages. These birds were trained to fly long distances and always find their way home. They would tie a little note to the pigeon's leg, and it would fly all the way to deliver it. This method was surprisingly reliable and was used for important messages. The pigeons were like little mail carriers with wings. They played a crucial role in communication, especially during wars when other methods were too risky. It's amazing how people communicated back then, right? They had to be resourceful and inventive. Each method had its own charm and challenges, making the act of communication a true adventure. Mr. Bell's big idea. Now let's meet the amazing Alexander Graham Bell. Born in 1847 in Scotland, Bell was always curious about the world around him. His mother was deaf, which inspired him to find ways to help people communicate better. He was a really smart inventor who was fascinated by sound. Bell's interest in sound led him to study acoustics, the science of sound, and he became an expert in this field. He wanted to find a way for people to talk to each other over long distances. Imagine living in a time when the only way to communicate with someone far away was by sending letters that took days or even weeks to arrive. Mr. Bell was also a teacher for deaf children, and he used sign language and special tools to help them communicate. His dedication to helping the deaf community was truly remarkable. He thought, wouldn't it be incredible if everyone could hear each other's voices, even when they're far apart? This idea sparked his imagination and set him on a path to create something revolutionary. So, he started experimenting in his workshop with wires, electricity, and all sorts of gadgets. Bell was determined to turn his big idea into reality, no matter how challenging it was. He spent so much time working on his invention that his workshop must have been a super exciting place. It was filled with the sounds of tinkering and the sight of new inventions taking shape. Can you imagine all the cool things he must have had in there? From early prototypes of the telephone to other fascinating gadgets, Bell's workshop was a hub of innovation and creativity. Chapter 3. Mr. Watson, come here! After working really hard, Mr. Bell finally had his big breakthrough. He had been tirelessly experimenting with sound transmission, trying to find a way to send voices over wires. His dedication and perseverance were about to pay off in a way he could never have imagined. He was in his workshop with his assistant, Thomas Watson, when he accidentally spilled some liquid. This mishap, however, turned out to be a blessing in disguise. As they scrambled to clean up the mess, Bell noticed something extraordinary happening with the equipment. "Mr. Watson, come here, I want to see you!" Bell shouted into the device. His voice was filled with excitement and anticipation, as he hoped that his invention would finally work. And guess what? Watson, who was in another room, heard him perfectly through the device. It was a moment of pure astonishment and joy. They had done it. The voice had traveled through the wires, clear and unmistakable. Can you imagine how excited they must have been? They jumped with joy, realizing that their hard work had paid off. This was not just a small step, it was a giant leap for communication technology. Those were the very first words ever spoken on the telephone. A simple phrase that marked the beginning of a new era. It was a historic moment that would be remembered for generations to come. It was a magical moment that changed the world forever. The invention of the telephone opened up endless possibilities for communication, connecting people like never before. From that day on, people could finally talk to each other over long distances without having to wait for letters or send pigeons. The world became a smaller place as voices could now travel across cities, countries, and even continents. The telephone revolutionized the way we communicate, bringing us closer together. Chapter 4. From dials to buttons to no wires? At first, telephones looked a lot different than they do now. They had these big round dials that you had to put your finger in and turn. It was like a fun little game trying to dial a number. But then, push-button phones came along and it made things so much easier. Remember those? You just had to push the buttons and it would make a cool beeping sound. And guess what? Telephones kept getting even cooler. Cordless phones were invented, so you didn't even need to be plugged into a wall anymore. You could walk around the house while you talked. It was like magic. Chapter 5. Super smartphones. Today we have smartphones, and they're like tiny little computers that fit right in our pockets. It's amazing how far technology has come. Not only can we make calls, but we can also send text messages, play games, watch videos, and even video chat with our friends and family all over the world. Smartphones are like having the whole world at our fingertips. It's incredible to think that it all started with Alexander Graham Bell's dream of connecting people through sound. From smoke signals to smartphones, the journey of the telephone is a reminder that anything is possible with a little imagination and a lot of hard work. Outro! See you soon! Wow, we learned so much about the telephone today. From those first words spoken by Alexander Graham Bell to the amazing smartphones we have now. It's been an incredible journey. Thanks for joining us on this amazing journey. Remember to like and subscribe for more fun and educational videos. See you next time.